Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling, well, a really significant subject: Islam. We're going to explore its core ideas, its history, and its massive global presence.
It's a huge undertaking. We're drawing on sources that look at the faith from its very beginnings right up to today, where it's the world's second largest religion.
And the fastest growing, apparently. Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking, what, over 1.2 billion people across more than 50 countries? Indonesia, Morocco, North America. It's everywhere.
It really is, and understanding it starts with the name itself. Islam. It's Arabic,
Meaning?
meaning submitting to God. That concept of submission, it's the key.
So a Muslim is literally one who submits to God, finds peace in that submission.
Exactly. And it all gets distilled down into that core creed, the Shahada.
There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God.
That's it, that one statement.
Yeah.
Radically monotheistic, especially considering the context it emerged from. And it organizes the lives of, almost a quarter of the planet.
Which brings us to that context. We need to rewind to Makkah, around 570 CE, Muhammad's birthplace. Our sources suggest it was a complex place.
Oh, absolutely. Harsh environment, very tribal, lots of economic instability. And religiously, polytheism was dominant, idolatry was common, even within the Kaaba.
The Kaaba, which Muslims believe Abraham originally built for one God.
That's the belief, yes. But at that time, it was filled with idols representing different tribal deities. It was central to Makkah's economy.
Right, the pilgrimage is tied to those idols. Big business for the Quraysh tribe.
Muhammad's own tribe, ironically. And beyond the religious aspect, society had, serious issues. High-interest loans, constant tribal feuds, even female infanticide was apparently on the rise. Just a lot of injustice.
And into this world, Muhammad is born, orphaned young, raised by his grandfather, then his uncle Abu Talib, known for being honest, right? Al-Amin, trustworthy.
Yes, he had that reputation early on, especially in business. He later married Khadija, a wealthy widow older than him by about 15 years.
And even before the revelations, he wasn't entirely comfortable with the status quo.
No, the sources suggest he already leaned towards monotheism and was troubled by the social injustices. He'd often retreat to a cave on Mount Hira, near Makkah, just to think, to contemplate.
Which leads to that pivotal moment in 610 CE on Mount Hira.
It's a profound event in Islamic tradition. During Ramadan, in the cave, the angel Gabriel appears.
And tells him.
Commands him, read. Muhammad, who was traditionally considered unable to read, was initially overwhelmed, but then recited the first verses revealed to him, now the beginning of Surah 96 in the Quran.
And that's the start, the beginning of 23 years of receiving these divine messages.
Yes. And when he began preaching this message, one God, no idols, social justice, it directly challenged Makkah's power structure.
Because it threatened the whole economic system built on the idols and the pilgrimages and their ancestral traditions.
Precisely. The Quraysh leadership saw him as a direct threat to their wealth and their entire way of life. So the opposition wasn't just theological, it was deeply political and economic, especially after Muhammad lost his protectors, Khadija and Abu Talib, in 619, the year of sorrow.
Things got dangerous for him then.
Very dangerous, which forced the Hijra, the migration, in 622 CE.
Moving from Makkah north to Yathrib.
Which was then renamed Medina, the city of the Prophet. This move is so significant, it marks year one of the Muslim calendar. It's the transition from a persecuted group to, a community with its own structure.
A foundational moment.
Absolutely. And interestingly, just before the Hijra, there's the account of the night journey and ascension of the Miraj.
Right, the mystical experience.
Yeah.
Transported from Makkah to Jerusalem on a winged creature, the Buraq.
And then ascending through the heavens, meeting previous prophets, Adam, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, before approaching God's throne.
That must have been an incredible source of validation, strength.
You'd imagine so. Reinforcing his role as the final prophet, preparing him for the immense task of leading a community in Medina, which involved political and even military challenges later on.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to the sacred texts themselves. The Quran. Its status is quite unique, isn't it?
It really is. Muslims understand the Quran not as Muhammad's words about God, but as Wahi, the literal, direct, uncorrupted word of God, delivered through Gabriel over those 23 years.
So Muhammad is seen as the vessel, the conduit for the message, not the author.
Exactly. He's reciting God's words. That's why the text itself is treated with such profound reverence. The name Quran even means recitation. It's meant to be spoken aloud.
And it's organized into surahs, chapters, and ayats, verses, or signs.
Correct. And while the Quran is the primary source for everything, particularly law, Sharia, There's a second important source, the Hadith,
Which are?
collections of traditions about the Prophet Muhammad's own sayings and actions, his sunnah, or practice. They provide the practical examples and context for how to live according to the Quranic principles.
And at the absolute center of it all is Allah, the proper name for God.
Yes, Allah. And the core belief is Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God. This was the radical departure from Makkah's polytheism.
God as all-powerful, all-knowing.
Omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, the creator and master of everything. Nothing happens outside his knowledge or will.
There's that famous verse, the verse of the throne, Quran 2.255. It really captures that sense of majesty.
It does, beautifully. It speaks of God as the ever-living, the self-subsisting. Neither slumber nor sleep overtakes him. His knowledge encompasses everything in the heavens and earth. It conveys this sense of complete, overwhelming, yet sustaining power.
And Islam sees itself in a line with previous traditions.
Yeah.
Judaism, Christianity.
Absolutely. Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, they're all revered as major prophets in Islam.
But Muhammad is seen as the final one.
The seal of the prophets, yes.
Yeah.
Completing the message. But there are key theological differences, of course. Well, the Quran affirms Jesus' virgin birth and miracles, but explicitly denies he was the Son of God in the Christian sense. It also presents a different account of the crucifixion, stating he wasn't actually crucified, but was raised to heaven by God and will return.
Okay, so that covers the core beliefs and texts. Let's talk about practice. Islam as a complete code of life. How does that manifest?
Primarily through the 5 pillars. These are the essential framework for living out that submission to God. They're not just rituals. They shape individual life and community identity.
We already mentioned Pillar 1, the Shahada, the Declaration of Faith. What's next?
Pillar 2, Salat. The mandatory prayers, performed 5 times a day, facing the Kaaba in Makkah.
And there's a ritual cleansing beforehand.
Yes, wudu, or sometimes ghusl, a more complete washing. It's about physical and spiritual purity before prayer. And on Fridays, the midday prayer is communal, mandatorily for men at the mosque.
Which explains mosque design elements like the mihrab, the niche showing the direction of prayer, and the lack of seats.
Exactly. The focus is entirely on prayer, and the separation of genders during prayer is traditionally observed to minimize distraction. The call to prayer, the adhan, is typically given from a minaret, a tower.
Okay, Pillar 3, Zakat, almsgiving. But it's not just optional charity.
No, that's a crucial point. Zakat is an obligation. It's typically calculated as 2.5% of one's accumulated wealth above a certain threshold, paid annually. The word zakat itself means to purify or to increase.
So it's like a purification of wealth and a form of social welfare built into the system.
Precisely. It's a foundational way to redistribute wealth, support the needy, and ensure the community's well-being. It purifies the rest of your earnings, in a sense.
And then Pillar 4, Psalm, fasting.
Yes, the mandatory fast during the entire month of Ramadan. From dawn until sunset, Muslims abstain from food, drink, smoking, and sexual relations.
The purpose being?
Spiritual discipline, primarily. Developing self-control, empathy for those who are hungry, and focusing on devotion. It's a time of intense spiritual reflection and community bonding, and it ends with a major celebration, Eid al-Fitr.
Right, the festival of breaking the fast. And finally, Pillar 5, the Hajj.
The pilgrimage to Makkah. It's obligatory once in a lifetime for every Muslim who is physically and financially able to undertake the journey.
All focused on the Kaaba, which ties back to Abraham.
Yes, circling the Kaaba, performing rituals that commemorate events in the lives of Abraham and his family. It's a powerful symbol of global Muslim unity.
Before we get into the historical developments after Muhammad, we should probably address a term that causes a lot of confusion: jihad.
Yes, definitely. It's vital to understand the nuance. The word jihad literally means striving or struggle.
Not just holy war.
No, that's a common, often inaccurate translation. Islamic scholarship talks about the greater jihad and the lesser jihad.
Okay, what's the
The
distinction?
greater jihad is the internal struggle, the fight against your own ego, your base desires, striving to be a better, more godly person. That's considered the more important, the constant struggle.
And the lesser jihad.
That's the external struggle. Historically, this could include defending the community against attack or fighting against oppression. But even this form of jihad has strict ethical rules in Islam about who can be fought, protecting non-combatants, proportionality. It's not carte blanche for violence.
That external struggle was certainly relevant in the early days in Medina. Muhammad led defensive battles.
He did. Battles like Bodir, Uhud, the Trench. These were largely defensive responses to the aggression from Makkah. aimed at protecting the nascent Muslim community.
And eventually this led to the return to Makkah.
Yes, in 630 CE, the conquest of Makkah. Muhammad returned with a large force of followers, and the city submitted largely without bloodshed. He then cleared the idols from the Kaaba and significantly offered amnesty to most of his former enemies.
A powerful moment of reconciliation. But that unity under his leadership didn't last long after his death in 632 CE.
No, his death created an immediate leadership crisis. The question was, who succeeds him? Who becomes the caliph, the successor?
And the community chose Abu Bakr, his close friend and father-in-law.
They did. Abu Bakr became the first caliph. He was crucial in consolidating the community, commissioning the collection of the Quran into a single written text, and dealing with tribes that tried to break away after Muhammad's death.
But not everyone agreed with that choice.
No. A significant group felt the leadership should have passed to Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, someone from his direct family line.
And this initial political disagreement eventually hardened into the major split we see today.
Exactly. It evolved over time into distinct theological and legal differences. You have the Sunnis, who make up about 85% of Muslims today. They follow the Sunnah, the well-trodden path, emphasizing the consensus of the community and the legitimacy of the first four caliphs.
And the Shias?
The Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali. They believe leadership should have remained within Muhammad's family, through Ali and his descendants, whom they call imams, divinely guided, infallible leaders.
It started political, but became deeply theological.
Very much so. And we should also mention Sufism. It's not really a separate sect like Sunni or Shia.
What is it then?
It's more like the mystical dimension, or the inner path, within both Sunni and Shia Islam. Sufis focus on direct, personal experience of God, on love, sincerity, and purifying the heart. It's about the spiritual journey inward.
Despite these internal divisions, the early Islamic expansion was incredibly fast.
Astonishingly fast.
Yeah.
Within a century, Islamic rule stretched from Spain all the way to parts of India. And this wasn't just conquest. It led to a remarkable cultural flourishing.
The Islamic Golden Age.
Right, roughly from the 8th to the 13th or 14th century, there were huge advances. Muslim scholars preserved and translated vast amounts of Greek philosophy and science works that might have been lost otherwise.
And they built on it too.
Absolutely. Major contributions in medicine, developing hospitals, surgical techniques. In mathematics, they established algebra and, crucially, adopted and spread the use of the Indian numeral system, including what we now call Arabic numerals. It revolutionized calculation, astronomy, chemistry, architecture. It's an incredibly vibrant period.
Let's jump forward to some contemporary issues. The status of women in Islam is often a topic of discussion, particularly in the West. What do the sources say?
Well, the Quranic ideal, as highlighted in the sources, emphasizes spiritual equality between men and women. There's a famous verse, Quran 33.35, that lists virtues like devotion, patience, charity, and promises the same reward for believing men and believing women who embody them. The Quran also instructs men to treat women with kindness.
And the hijab, the headscarf, it's often seen as the defining symbol.
The Quran advises modesty for both men and women. The hijab is interpreted by many as fulfilling that for women. But it's important to note its interpretation and practice vary hugely. For some, it's a legal requirement. For others, a personal choice. And interestingly, many Muslim women, especially in places like Canada, describe wearing it as an act of identity, even liberation shifting focus from physical appearance to intellect and character.
It's not always imposed then.
Not necessarily, no. The motivations and contexts are very diverse.
What about polygamy? That's another point often raised.
The Quran does permit a man to marry up to 4 wives. However, that permission comes with a very strict condition. He must treat them all with perfect justice and equality.
Which is difficult to achieve.
The text itself immediately follows up by saying that if you fear you cannot be just, then marry only one. Because perfect justice is arguably impossible, many scholars and most Muslims today see this as implicitly favoring monogamy. And in practice, monogamy is overwhelmingly the norm in Muslim societies worldwide. The permission often relates more to specific historical or social circumstances, like caring for widows and orphans in times of war.
Okay, let's bring it home. Islam in Canada, it has a history here too.
It does. Muslims started arriving back in the mid-19th century, often working in farming or on the railways. But the major growth came after World War II, with waves of immigration bringing skilled workers and professionals.
And the community has grown significantly since then.
Definitely. From around 250,000 in the early 90s to estimates closer to 650,000 or more now. Concentrated mainly in big urban centers, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver.
And institutions grew alongside the population.
Yes. Figures like Dr. M. Kadir Beg were important in establishing Islamic studies, for example, at the University of Toronto back in the 60s. And mosques were being built. One of the very earliest permanent mosques in North America was actually built in Edmonton in 1938, though sources sometimes point to 1930 for its community's beginnings. Toronto got its first major mosque around 1969.
So we've gone from 7th century Makkah all the way to 21st century Canada. It's quite a journey. But that core idea, that thread throughout...
Is Islam. Submission.
Yeah.
Finding peace through submitting to the will of God.
Right. It connects the history, the beliefs, the practices, the global community.
And maybe a final thought to leave you, the listener, with, drawing from the sources. The Quran emphasizes that God judges actions based on the intentions behind them. So think about this. If faith involves rituals, prayers, fasting, how does focusing on your sincere intention change the experience? Does it shift it from maybe an obligation or even a chore into something deeply personal, a genuine striving? It's that internal dimension, the why behind the what, that seems critically important, something to reflect on